So the nominees for this year's Academy Awards have been announced, and the directors category is shaping up to be quite a tight competition. So instead of debating on who should and shouldn't be nominated, I thought it would be a good idea to see how these directors got their filmmaking debuts and how these movies were made in the first place. Were these people just destined for greatness from the get-go? Or did they maybe have a rocky start, learn from their mistakes, and get to the point where they are today? Let's find out. So this year we've got 5 nominees. We've got Sean Baker, James Mangold, Jacques Audiard, Emily Fargeat, and Brady Corbet. Let me just get this out of the way now. Oscars so white? More like Oscars so French. Look, I know Brady Corbet is American, but his first movie is set in Versailles and his last name is still French, so just let me have this, okay? So let's start with James Mangold. Known for projects like Logan, Ford vs. Ferrari, and the new Indiana Jones movie, Mangold is nominated this year for directing A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan biopic starring Timothée Chalamet. And while biopics are usually the most blatantly Oscar bait movies, that doesn't mean Mangold isn't a good filmmaker. Look, I remember back in 2018, people were up in arms about him not getting nominated for Best Director for Logan. The man knows how to make a movie, and you can see his talent front and center in his debut feature film, Heavy. Released in 1995, Heavy follows the story of Victor, his mother, and a bunch of regulars at a local tavern in upstate New York who seem to be going through the motions. All of them unhappy, but not unhappy enough to actually do anything about it. That is, until a college dropout named Callie applies for a job as a waitress. Mangold has been quoted as saying that he wanted the film to feel like a silent film with sound, which in current year means he wanted the film to be primarily vibes-based. And I'd say he does that pretty well. The characters are well-rounded without relying on dialogue, the story is believable, and the vibes are present and accounted for. And while there are some weirdly timed edits and the vibes sometimes overstay their welcome, I would say this is a great debut feature film. Now, at this point in his life, Mangold was quite disillusioned with the studio system, and he was convinced that if he wanted to have a shot at being a director, he would have to produce a film independently.
There's this great fallacy about that most film schools, and even people outside of film schools, young filmmakers, are captured by this myth of the studio being this kind of minor league that is going to embrace you and coddle you and bring, oh, you'll do a Law and Order, then you'll do this, and then finally we'll unveil you and you'll direct Witness.
Right.
But that just doesn't happen. I mean, anyone could sit down tonight and think about this and think, can I think of one director I really admire who has come up through the studio system? And of course, there's the one great example, which is Steven Spielberg. He is the vast exception.
And so he set out with a script that he wrote himself. One that he knew he would be able to shoot with a limited budget. Well, limited by Hollywood standards.
How much money do you need to make Heavy?
Heavy? I need about $250,000.
Is that it?
It's a great example of economical filmmaking. It implements a technique that's pretty similar to what I'm doing with my upcoming feature film. Check out next week's video for more on that, by the way. Where the majority of the film takes place in one location, with other locations briefly being sprinkled in across the runtime. Depending on what you would call a location, Heavy features about 10. 2 of these locations I'm pretty sure are just rooms in the house that they use in the film, and another 5 of these I'm pretty sure only need like 1 or 2 shoot days to actually wrap. And that's why I put so much emphasis on writing with your locations in mind. Mangold was also really clever when it came to his casting. By using emerging actors like Pruitt Taylor Vince and a pre-Lord of the Rings Liv Tyler, he was able to free up more of his budget without having to sacrifice the quality of his performances. Overall, I would say Heavy is a very attainable first feature, if that makes any sense. All the technical aspects of the film are serviceable, and I don't mean that as an insult. It looks good, it sounds good, but I would say that you'd be able to match the technical fidelity of Heavy pretty easily nowadays. What really elevates this movie to a great debut feature film is the quality of the writing, the acting, and the music. Check it out if you're curious. It's available for free on YouTube, so why not? Link in the description. So while James Mangold was able to generate immediate success with his debut feature, another Oscar-nominated director on this list wasn't so lucky. Sean Baker, known for pioneering iPhone filmmaking with Tangerine, and making me cry like a little baby with The Florida Project, is nominated this year for his work on Anora. But before finding his stride as a director, and long before an Academy Award nomination was even an option, Sean Baker released his first feature film, 4 Letter Words. 4 Letter Words is a movie about a bunch of young dudes hanging out in a house and having a bunch of drunken arguments. That's pretty much it. And I know that sounds harsh, but that seems to be the consensus between critics, fans, and even Baker himself. It's honestly hard to even get info about this movie. I mean, nobody wants to talk about it. Like, look at this movie section on Baker's Wikipedia page. Sean Baker's first feature film was 4 Letter Words, a film revolving around the looks, views, attitudes, and language of young men in America. He wrote, directed, and edited the film. He then made Takeout. So as you can probably tell, Baker doesn't really talk about this film a lot. In an interview with the Creative Independent, after specifically being asked about the differences between his debut and his modern films, Baker had this to say. Looking back at it, oh my god, it's a young movie. It's literally a person making a film right out of college with no life experience. It was just basically guys in the suburbs hanging out at a late night party. That's what I knew, so that was it. That 10 years through my 20s into my 30s, I think that I grew so much in terms of not only how I saw the world and what I've experienced, but also filmmaking. So as the premise suggests, it's a really simple film to make. It's just a bunch of dudes in a house, get a handful of actors, all of these were unknown actors at the time, although this is one of the first acting roles for Matthew Mayer, who's freaking amazing in Funny Pages. It mostly takes place in the same house, with some of the scenes in the latter half of the movie taking place at a petrol station and in a car. I'm pretty sure Baker writing, editing, and directing this film was more of a budget necessity than it was a creative choice, but it's something that stuck with him all the way up to Anora. 4 Letter Words, while not being revolutionary or even particularly good, serves as a great reminder that your first feature film is not the be-all and end-all of your career. As long as you keep going and learn with every project along the way, you can build yourself up to something that's truly Oscar-worthy. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, I'm actually really intimidated by Brady Corbet's debut feature. While he's currently busy making waves with The Brutalist, and seems to be the favorite to take home the Academy Award, Corbet actually started out his career as an actor. And he actually had some pretty good credits under his belt. Corbet was known for playing the role of Peter in Funny Games, as well as Derek Huxley in the TV show 24.
24.
Things were looking pretty good for him as an actor. I mean, in 2013 he even got nominated for Best Actor by the Irish Film Critic Awards. He was tied with Leonardo DiCaprio of all people. And that's impressive. I'm only tied with Leonardo DiCaprio for one thing, and that's how old my girlfriend is.
25. That's enough!
But he decided to give up acting entirely and pivot over to directing. And that's how we got The Childhood of a Leader. This is a big swing for a debut feature. Set in France after World War I, it's the story of a child who transforms into a non-specific fascist leader and his transformation from innocent child as seen by his mother and members of the community. It's a period piece set in 1920s France, taking place almost entirely in an intricately decorated mansion featuring Robert Pattinson and Liam Cunningham. As a debut feature. On paper, that doesn't sound like a movie that can exist. That sounds like something a freshman film major would come up with while smoking weed in his dorm. But here it is, and it works. The movie had a $5 million budget. Yep, you heard that right, $5 million. The first question to pop into your head is probably, how? I mean, even Corbett shelved the project thinking it was too big for a debut feature, until his wife and writing partner Mona Fastvold encouraged him to get funding for it. Now call this an educated guess, but I think Corbett has his acting career to thank for getting this opportunity. I'm not saying it's based off of his star power or anything. I'm just saying when you're an actor or a DOP or a lighting assistant or whatever, you spend a lot of time on film sets. And when you're on film sets, you meet other people in the filmmaking industry. So I'm assuming with all that time he spent on set, he must have met the right person at the right time with the right idea, and that's how it got made. And seeing as this was a US-French co-production, I'd say a lot of the financial risk was minimized for all parties involved, even at a $5 million budget. Next up, we have Jacques Audiard. Whatever you think about him, he's here, and he's nominated for Emilia Perez.
From penis to vagina.
I'm just gonna come out and say it. I think Audiard is a nepo baby. Yep, I know. Why do I say this? Well, if you look at his family tree, you can see Audiard's father, Michel Audiard, was a renowned scriptwriter with decades of scriptwriting experience under his belt. And his uncle is a producer. And I did read somewhere that he initially rejected the film industry and went to university to become a teacher. But I just find that so funny that you go to university to become a teacher with filmmaking as your backup plan. Usually that's the other way around. The other reason I'm convinced he's a nepo baby is because his first feature film was released all the way back in 1994 with a budget of $3 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's close to $6.5 million for your first feature film. Other than being a nepo baby, the film is good enough. You know, it's a road trip movie. It's got a bunch of different characters whose stories intermingle as the story goes on. It's really well shot. I think Gerard Sterren did a great job matching the darker, moody tone of the film. And at least Audiard takes the time to acknowledge his first feature. In an interview, he actually stated that the film helped him articulate himself better to other people.
Mais après, j'ai mis du temps, j'ai mis beaucoup à communiquer. Je suis autiste, moi, à ce moment. Je suis autiste, moi, à ce moment. Je suis autiste, moi, à ce moment.
But overall, the movie just isn't fun. And this brings us to our last Oscar-nominated director. Honestly, Coralie Fargeat is one of the most interesting directors working today. I'd honestly put her up there with Sean Baker and Yorgos Lanthimos. The way that she plays around and challenges filmic conventions while also being really upfront with her genre film influences is part of the reason that makes her film so challenging but so rewarding to watch. I honestly didn't expect to like Revenge as much as I did.
Women always have to put up a fight.
Now, this film has a lot of the elements that you'll find in The Substance, the film that she's nominated for this year. There's lots of body horror, there's lots of unashamed sexuality, you've got women being treated as replaceable objects and being thrown out when they're used up. But this time it's all presented as a woman who's been wronged in such a blatantly
Reprehensible
way that she sets out to do the only rational thing in the situation. To find each of the men that did this to her and kill them in increasingly graphic ways. Fargeat was born in Paris and she received her film education there as well. Her love of sci-fi and gore forced her to learn how to market her films quite early on. She often brings up the story of her setting up a teaser trailer with a bunch of stock footage and music to help illustrate the look and feel that she wants for her film. But thanks to her connection with La Femis, a prestigious film school in Paris, she was able to secure a $3 million budget for the project. The way she managed to keep the film relatively cheap to produce are subtle but very effective. For starters, the film only has 7 actors, and 2 of which are only voice appearances. This, along with being set entirely in the Moroccan desert, helped to reduce some of the logistical issues that come with large crews and varied locations. However, all of the stress that she took off of the budgetary restrictions was immediately put on the quality of the script and her directing. In the hands of a different director, this film easily could have felt underbaked and icky. But it is this thrilling revenge story that manages to become more than the sum of its parts that makes Revenge an excellent feature film debut. Well, that covers everyone. From independent productions taking a shot at launching their careers to long incubated talent finally being presented to the world, it just comes to show you there's no one way that a feature film should be made. None of these directors' stories are exactly the same, yet here they are, competing for what's arguably the most prestigious award in the film industry. I would say I relate the most with Mangold and Baker's approaches to making their first feature films. When speaking to friends and family about my upcoming feature, I always tell them I want it to be the way that it is because of me. If it's horrible, I want it to be because of me and I want to be able to learn from that. If it's great, I want it to be great because of me and the work that I put into it. Even if it doesn't launch my career where I want it to be, like Heavy did, or it doesn't end up premiering at TIFF like Revenge, I will still be happy just to be able to call the film my own. I hope you guys enjoyed this, let me know in the comments, and if you've made it this far in the video, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed. I've got a cool video coming out next week about the gear that I used to make my first feature film and gear that I would recommend to you if you're planning on doing the same. So keep an eye out for that. And with that said, I'm Chris, I make movies, new videos every week.